past 2 days, Elizabeth Vosseller.
RPMers. What a pleasure it is to be in a community of like-minded people. You know, I'm a huge believer in community. And community is defined as a group of people working towards a common goal. And that's absolutely what's in this room today. So what a pleasure, and thank you all for being here. So just to introduce myself, my name is Elizabeth Vosseller. I'm a speech language pathologist and an educator. I've been working for the last 20 years in autism. I like to say about 10, and you're like, whoa. You know, it's amazing how that concept of time changes as we age, or as I age anyway. I have a bachelor's and master's in speech language pathology, and I did my doc work in early childhood special ed at George Washington University. I taught as an associate professor, both to speech and language students, with a big emphasis on clinical development. So working with young SLPs to learn their craft, and also working with master's level of educators. So going in lots of different schools, school settings, early intervention placements, and training teachers to be teachers. And I've been involved with autism my entire career. I first started at Children's Hospital, Children's National Medical Center in DC, where I was on their very first inaugural autism team. Back when it was a new concept to come together as a multidisciplinary team. You know, now they have, Children's has a huge self-standing center for autism. And I began the RPM journey in 2013 that started with a client who's here, Brooke Pothouse. I had agreed to work with her son, and we were going to do a pretty intense amount of work together. And about 2 weeks after we met and discussed this, she said, oh, I met this amazing woman, you know, and then my son was doing this, and I'm like, really? Because I've heard this over 20 years, you know, oh, we're going to do fill in the blank X, we're going to do fill in the blank Y, we're going to go across the country and see this one specialist, and we're going to do this. So I was a little bit skeptical at first. And she said, and I want you to go and train with her in 2 weeks. And I'm like, what? You know, so that was my entree into Soma. One of the things I appreciated about Soma when she started teaching was immediately about the brain and the science behind RPM. And as someone who taught neuroanatomy, I was like, okay, you know, you're not just making this up because, oh, it works, you know. Here's how fine motor works. Here's how the brain works. Here's how we listen. Here's how we learn. So it made a lot of sense to me. And I've always believed that autistic kids are smart because I've worked with them for the last 20 years. And for the last 20 years, they've been outsmarting me with every turn. You know, so that wasn't a stretch for me to believe that these guys were comprehending, that they were understanding. What was constantly frustrating to me is getting to that communication. You know, that communication you could see in their face or in their bodies that they weren't able to control. So this was huge to be able to be introduced to this method that was so effective. So I began working with Soma in DC and with Brienne Devine when they were coming to DC, observing, you know, hanging out all sessions, watching the kids. Some started coming to my office and just trying to soak in everything that I could over the last almost 3 years now. So to me, there's two parts. You know, there's the beginning part of learning the boards, you know, of the kids being able to point and spell to communicate. But then as kids get more fluent, and we have a nice, you know, in our practice, we have lots of kids who we see once, sometimes twice a week. And as the kids were getting more and more fluent, to me, the next question is, now what? You know, now what do we do with, yes, you're learning, yes, you're spelling. And when the kids and the parents are coming and saying, we have goals. We want our kids to take the GED. We want our kids to be included in the school, but they don't have this experience with it. So, you know, what can we do to build the skills, to build the tolerance, to be able to participate in that kind of learning? And for me, a part of that is groups. So we work individually with kids and parents to get that fluency going, to get their initial skills. But then working in groups. And again, As an educator, as a college professor, I'm big on group learning, right? That's why we're all here, to learn together. There's something very powerful that goes on when you share learning together, when you construct meaning together, when you interact with each other. Because I might have a thought going, and somebody else adds on to that thought and makes it deeper and richer. So, what do we know about benefits of group learning? Cognitive. There's a positive learning growth that happens not only for retention, but for constructing meaning when we learn in groups. We've got the research to back that up. Language improves. I hang around smart people because they make me smarter, right? Even if I only get 75% of what you're telling me, I'm 75% smarter than I was before because of what you shared. So there's a language that happens in group learning, and we're going to talk a little bit about the language of discourse and how do you elicit some of that. Discussion, collaborative writing, and constructivist learning. A lot of education has the banker model. I deposit information to you, you withdraw it on demand, And the constructivists say, let's create this together. It's the teach me to fish and I don't go hungry kind of thought. We're constructing learning, we're creating it together. I'm a vested partner in this learning. I'm going to retain it better, and I'm going to be able to connect it to other learning better. There's the social aspect. I'm your quintessential looking therapist teacher, little white blonde lady, right? Your kids are sick to death of little white blonde ladies. Add in an occasional brunette lady or maybe a redhead, spice things up. But, learning from each other is much more exciting. They're creating the meaning together. So it's the peer engagement. We're working on those skills, the turn taking. Turn taking requires body control, waiting for your turn before you jump in. And it requires listening, collaboration, negotiation. What are we going to talk about? Whose turn is it to go next? I'm very interested in your thing. Keep away from me. Those are important skills. After a while, as the groups evolve, they become very student-led. We follow the interests of the students. It's motivating, and the problem-solving skills also develop, and it's fun. It's just a great way to learn. So, is this what our groups look like? I'd actually like to find a group ever that looks like this, neurotypical kids. This is not what our groups look like. This is what our groups look like. It looks like, I like to call it Cirque du Squirrel. It's just like, it's loud, it's overstimulating, there's a lot of moving around. But we make it work because that's our learners, right? Our learners are not nice little quiet, sit in the chair, raise the hand, gee, I'd really like to share this with you. That's not our population. So, I wasn't done.
Sorry.
So our population, this is our long-standing group, and most of them are at the table for most of the session. But that's after a year and a half of working together. This is one of our newest group, what we call our littles, and they're 6-year-olds. Most of them have been RPMing since they were 4 and 5. But we put on carpet squares as a suggestion of maybe you'd like to sit there. We've got chairs around that maybe you'd like to sit in, but we work with you where you are, moving around. So that's what it looks like herding cats. But, and after a while I'm oblivious to it. Somebody else will come in and they're like really overstimulated, and I'm kind of like, what are you talking about? This is how we roll. Okay. Oopsie.
Sorry about that.
All right, so regulation. I've got a group, in my young adults group, which we'll talk about our original group, we have anywhere from 6 to 8 kids in the group, right? That's a lot of autism going on in one room. And your calming stim is my annoying stim, right? What's soothing you might be escalating me. So there's a lot of how do we keep regulated? How do we have, sometimes our basic goal is no bloodshed. for the group. We just want, some learning to happen. But the evolution that's happened over time is really amazing. So, we have a variety of tools that the kids can use. So we've got weighted quilts that one of our friends, local to the community, has made for our clinic. We've got Tom, and by the way, these kids look totally different in their individual sessions. So Tom, who sits very happily down here in the bottom, in an individual session during group, he often has 2 devices going. iPod in one hand and a, iPad in the other hand. But yet he's constantly paying attention, and that helps him stay regulated. Take that away, and he's not available to learn. Lisa loves to write. She loves handwriting. So after she's spelled something on the boards and we've got it written down, she sits there and she copies it. That's her, soothing and keeps her engaged. So we find what works. If you need to sit on the floor, okay. Are you still learning on the floor? Great, I have no problem with that. Okay, we also meet our learners where they are. Maybe your response is just a single word. Maybe your response is a sentence. Maybe you're responding on the stencil boards. Maybe somebody else is responding on the laminate boards. We don't, even though a lot of our fluent young adults can use the keyboard, we don't tend to do that in group because that just becomes messy, running around and trying to coordinate the keyboard and the iPad and all that kind of business. So I love the laminated board, and we use that all the time. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our groups. So the first group is our original group, and they just, after a year and a half, have given themselves a name, where they call themselves the Tribe. And our core group of it are Juan, Ben, Emma, Ryan, Matthew, and Tom. Lisa has recently joined us. It's a transplant from California. Thank you so much, Katie and the Californians, for setting up fabulous Lisa, who's amazing. We've also had, RPMers who join us periodically. Ian from Seattle, Nick, Mike from Syracuse. So, but our core group, and they've gotten to know each other. And that's really important. There's this notion sometimes in autism, especially a lot of different therapies, a lot of different places, they offer, social skills groups. I'm not even going to talk about how usually unsocial they are. But just because you're autistic does not mean you appropriately group together, right? You need to be, there needs to be a common thread. So in our young adults group, they range from 16 to 24. But most of them are 18, 19, 20 in that range. They're all very fluent RPMers for this group. So we can do stuff that's geared for their level. Some of our newer groups, we've got not beginners, because beginners need to still be working on those skills, but we've got kids who are at similar levels. And they've built a cohesion with each other. They've learned to negotiate with each other. One of our guys, Paul, sitting on the lower end of that road, he gets terrible migraines. Emma, who I love and who I've been working with for the last 12 years, has a very interesting screech that can come out that can shatter glass. That at one point, Paul said, "No offense, your screech is a direct line to my migraine." So they've learned how to work that out, and even though Emma will still sometimes get her screech going, she usually follows with it. Paul's got a headache, Paul's got a headache. So mindfulness, and being aware is something that's developed over time, and it's been really, really neat to watch that evolution for our learners.
Hey, I'm not a great assistant.
And Christy convinced me that I was not capable of working the power button on my own. That's for sure. So what are some things that we've done? It comes from the professor in me, it comes from the speech language pathologist in me, it comes from the educator in me. You don't go in to teaching without a plan. You will get eaten alive. I love that Soma's curriculum, or that RPM is based around cognitive lessons. And I do remember early on watching and going, but you know, do my parents really care if their kid talks about Alexander the Great? But the more, you know, I thought about this, the more it makes sense. And I spent a lot of time obsessively thinking about things. That we do this for each other as typicals. We give each other topics. Sometimes it's because I don't want you to go there on another topic if you're left to your own devices. But even if you're standing in an elevator with somebody and they're giving you that look like they want to talk to you, you know, I'll a lot of times throw out a topic like, oh, do you think it's going to rain today? Or something like that, because I want to control, you know, the topic. I love this idea of conversation is really recycled information. You know, and parents all the time, they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to listen, I just want to talk with my kid. But it really is recycled information, and I'll say to them, how many conversations, unique conversations, do you and your spouse have together? I'm talking themes. If you're lucky, you might have 10. What's for dinner? Who's got the kids? Money? Scheduling? How was your day? And there are variations on a theme. You know, if I give you a topic, you know, Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, you might not want either, but what you say back to me is going to tell me a lot about your political leanings, right? Without me saying a very invasive, who are you going to vote for? As soon as someone asks me kind of things like that, I want to say, none of your business. You know, so creating conversations around a topic. So all of our learning that happens in any of our groups is around information. And with Tribe, we've done units. So we've done a unit on activism and advocacy. This was in the summertime. It was over 4 sessions that we brought in guests from the autism field. We had a Skype call with autism activist Landon Bryce, with Lydia Wyman, with the mayor from our town, who came in and talked to the kids about your voice is important, you know, about voting, about what do you want me to do as mayor for you. It was huge. And it also, at the same time, changed that mayor. She left and she called me up. She said, Elizabeth, when I came in, I thought I was doing you a favor. She said, you just did me a favor. You know, I will never think about autistics the same way. So that's part of that ripple effect. It's a really nice byproduct. We did a group around music in the mind. We brought in musicians who talked about being musicians, who talked about their passion for it, who talked about the fact that you're not going to get rich being a musician, you know? And then the kids wrote lyrics to a song that this musician is now composing music for. You know, I'm very big into, I never liked busy work. I didn't like to give it to my students. I didn't like it when I was a student. You know, it's not about how great is the product, but it's about the process of creating this product. I don't care if the song sucks, but they've made a song, and it's going to be put to music so they can hear it. That to me is important, and it's important to our learners. We did a fabulous lesson around Plankton Dreams. It is my all-time favorite of Tito's books. It's hysterically funny, and it is rich from a language and a writing perspective on use of imagery, metaphors, sarcasm, satire, you know, you name it, character development. So we did writings around, you know, create a Plankton Dreams type character. You know, when Tito talks about floating around on his cloud, looking at things, create your own imagery of what happens with you, engaging them. And so the kids read this book at home with their parents. The parents read to them. So it's also another way of interacting. By the way, with our young adults group, it's just the young adults. We do not have parents participating in it. And the reason why is the first time I was brave enough to try to throwing a bunch of kids in the room together, we did do a lesson around imagery. And I said, give me a word and an image that goes with it. And one of my guys, Juan, his word was dependence. And I said, okay, now give an image that tells me what dependence means to you. He said, dog on a leash. I've never been able to let that go, because that's a really powerful image. But these kids are rarely more than leash distance away. So, you know, not that I'm the coolest person in the world, but I'm not mom. You know, and I hire cool people. who are infinitely cooler than me, to raise that factor, in the rooms. So now with my littles, we do have parents in the rooms, A, because that's more developmentally appropriate, but B, because we're also working on getting the parents on the board and their opportunity to coach and participate. So again, meeting your learners where they are and where their needs are. We did a week on business and finance. I only know so much about so much, but again, I hang around smart people because they make me smarter. I'm not really fond of compliments. When people are like, oh, you do really great work. I don't really care. You know what? What do you do? Oh, you're a writer? Oh, you're a documentary producer and you want to teach your kids about film? Oh, you're a quilter? You want to talk about sewing? Everybody knows something. Everybody can be a potential expert. Put them to work. Put them to work teaching your kids. Have them call in and do a Skype lesson. Have them send you information about themselves. Get free labor. All about that. So in Business Week, one of our parents who is a business executive for the airlines, he came in and he talked to the kids about finance, about supply and demand, about the stock market. The kids then picked a stock. He went home and researched it. He said, okay, if you invested this much, this is how much, and by the way, their stocks were all through the roof. Megan and I are kind of writing it down. It's kind of like when E.F. Hutton talks. If only I would follow up on that. But they also wrote their own business plans. We said, think about, we're talking about business. If you were to start a business, consider realistically, assess yourself. Like, I find the kids are really pretty in tune to what they can and can't do. They don't see themselves going and sitting in a cube farm at IBM. They were like, I'm going to need to work from home, but I'm good at this, and I'm good at this. We said, what accommodations do you need? What kind of, do you need an interpreter? Do you need this? Do you need that? And they each wrote up a business plan for what they want to do. Right? One of my girls wants to write, she wants to be a lyricist. She nailed down even her target audience. She said, I need an indie musician because that's the vibe of my lyrics, which is really cool. One of my guys said he wanted to be an encoder, which at first we took to mean like computer programmer, and later it was revealed he meant, no, he wanted to write encrypted code. I thought that was brilliant. Who's going to break the autistic encrypted code? So, communication of art. We brought in a guest artist. They made a collage that I'd like to say is beautiful. It is beautiful, but it's very dark. If I had been in charge of that collage, it would have been like rainbows and happy colors. And theirs was very dark, but it was them. And we helped them with the motor. We did motor modeling. You need to put this here, here's how it goes. Coaching the model to get them doing that. And then one of the most fun things we did was playwriting. Again, I have a good friend. He's a play director, a drama teacher, and he was really interested in what I was doing. I'm really interested in what he was doing. We sat down over the summer, had a chat, and I said, let's put our students together. So with my 7 students, at first 7 of his students came over. We spent a week together, and we talked about how you write a play, how do you create a scene, how do you create imagery. And the kids together wrote a play that then the typically developing kids just put on. It was first done shown in January. It's a 1-act play, and it's about our kids that they wrote. It is 95% their words. The only other words are narration, that comes in and says, here's the stage, here's this. They were each of our students was portrayed by 2 people, one who played their body and one who played their brain. And they're connected. It was beautiful. My students were there every night at the play production and coming up and high-fiving the audience. And I mean, it was fabulous. And it was inclusive. I'm getting messed up.
And there's a video shortly.
And there's a video shortly. But it was an amazing experience. And one of my guys then, they said, well, when you work with the other kids, typical kids in your school, is it like this? And Ben spelled out the board, he's like, I've never worked with typical kids. This is the first time. And now I've got the typical kids that are crying, because it was a very special experience for all of them.
Yeah, no. It's the way I need it.
Okay, so here's, bringing in our guest educators, which we've brought in several. And this was from the summer, so I'm going to play a little video clip. Here's Eric, who is Ian's dad, teaching about finances. And here's Paul. At this point, he's got a migraine, and so he's laid himself on the floor. Everyone's gotten really good at not stepping on him, even the other, kids. I think he's probably at much more risk for Megan and I stepping on him than the other autistic kids stepping on him. But he's still sitting there listening. When it's his turn to respond, we'll go down to the floor and he pops up, and he spells and he lays back down. Once his migraine's resolved, he sits back up at the table. But he's got the space to do what he needs. So here's Ian talking to his dad. He's with Jessie, who is our summer intern, and and we're saying, what did you think about your dad teaching? You're not going to hear a lot of his spelling, but I want you to hear what the room sounds like.
Say more.
Yeah, we'll put it there.
Say more.
No, it's
So you get the idea. At one point, there was a particularly loud day, I don't know what was going on, it was kind of crazy. And the accountants from 2 doors, not even on our same building, but connected to the units, came over. They're like, is someone being, is there a crime going on here? We're like, no, just then with my office skipping through, We said, no, it's just our students. And you can read what Ian said to his dad, which was really cool. He said, I love learning all he knows about business. This changes the conversation too between student and child, or student and parent. Okay, so there's a language around conversation. A language around learning conversation, discourse. So how do we engage the kids? Sometimes I found when people in a group, it's here's a whole bunch of kids and here's a bunch of people all on the letterboard, each with their kid. That's not learning. That's a lot of people doing individual responses and questions in the same room. So how do you engage in different communication forms that also build tolerance? Because some of them are short responses and some of them are longer responses. And varying that so you're not, overstimulating and maxing out your learner. So we've got, different types of responses. I'm going to talk about each of them, but before you go on, the breakout groups, and that one's pretty obvious, sometimes we'll split the kids into 2 groups. So one will go into a room with me and one into a room with Megan, and then we come back and we share. So a great example of that was during Business Week. We did a case study on Subway, the fast food company, that they're not so fresh anymore. So, we had talked about principles of business, and then the kids split in these 2 different groups, and they formed their own company and said, what would you do if you were advising the CEO of Subway? And so one group, their whole thing was from a whole food point of view. We go, non-GMO, farm-to-table kind of food, local, and organic, and the other went from a complete business perspective. Cut the number of franchises, so there's less supply, there's more demand, up the pay of your workers. Theirs was really financial. One of my parents came in the room and I'm like, oh, look, there's the CEO of Subway right there. Grabbed him, scooped him into the room, and we presented back to him. And this guy's a business guy. He was like, I'm not blowing sunshine here, but I have to go from both perspectives. So it's really kind of fun to take those and compare ideas. Okay. So we'll do something that we call rapid fire. So that's a 1 word. We did a unit around StoryCorps. If you're not familiar with it, it's an amazing project where people are interviewed, they share stories in this really powerful way. So, and they're really short. So we discussed, one of the stories where a teacher has basically adopted a student and that adult student is living with him with his young child. So, after discussing that, we said, quick, one word for what you think the theme of the story is. And we just hop from kid to kid to kid to kid to kid. Give me your own, so that we can all get in there. Then we have what we call all spell, which, kind of dating myself, is my equivalent of like all skate, back then. But this was all spell. So, what we'll say, and this is great for like a prediction kind of thing. Again, short answers because you're waiting for your turn, but that's a skill. That's a tolerance skill. It's not all about you. You have to wait and you have to listen. And we also work on listening. So, what do you think about, we're getting ready to read a poem by Poe. This was during Poetry Week where we sampled poetry styles throughout the ages. What do you think we hear about Poe? Juan said a crow, Emma haunting stories. And this, kind of just prediction and forecasting. It's good teaching. A mustache and scary weird stories. I love that one. Didn't he write about a dead man's heartbeat? Not much, but I'm interested in hearing more. Great.
Are they pre-taught something about this? What,
No, we've had a week long on poetry, but we're getting ready to talk about Poe. So these are all, again, young adults. What do you think you know about Poe? So we're previewing questions. What do you think might happen? Now we're going to talk about it.
Does anyone ever say nothing, or I don't know?
Sure, Tom, not much. I want to know more. But a lot of pictures, Poe's pretty iconic with that brooding face and the mustache. So do you know anything? You're welcome to say no. Right? So that's why it's all spelled. Get everybody in there. And then we also know where our learners are. So another discourse technique is called say, mean, matter. What did the text say? What does it mean? Why does it matter? So in this, we've already gone through our say, mean part. But this was a 2-week unit we did on Jaime Quesac, who is Google's education evangelist. And I kind of stumbled across him because he has this great quote that says, stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up. Ask them, what problem do you want to solve? Because that will tell you what you need to learn. And I love that, especially for our kids. So we're talking about this. There's a quote from Quesac, where he said, and this was a quote that Quesac said when he was presenting at the White House with the First Lady event. And, I call upon you to ignore the haters and the naysayers, right? So now take a look at what our group looks like a year and a half later. And again, they're all doing their thing. And we've got we've kind of seamed it together. So here I'm working with Ben. Emma's got her blanket over her head. Tom is down here on the floor in the corner. We'll see him pop up in a minute.
This is us to achieve.
There he is. But you notice how the room's a lot more regulated, it's a lot calmer. These guys have come together as a cohesive group, which your cohesion's important. You can't just be popping kids in and out of this. They have to develop, a tolerance for each other, a tolerance for the learning. Okay, with your overcoming. So here's what Ben has said. The part in bold is what he just did on the boards, but that's his entire comment about it. Now watch how this learning starts to construct. So he wrote, disrespect for the impossible is what we do best. This is us to a T. We are autistic and we are overcoming our inability to talk by spelling. This is how you tear down walls. And now here's Lisa, who's over here writing. Juan's adding on to this constructivist learning.
And there's a period. Wait, please.
Okay, so here's what, just this little snippet of the board. It says, I'm always hearing those people referring to, you'll face people with low expectations of you, from the KSAT quote. I'm always hearing those people say, they're just looking out for me. I love this. I have my team of yay sayers because it talked about don't listen to the naysayers. So he's made up this word, which I think is bad, but I'm going to start incorporating into my vocabulary. And now Brian, Brian's often considered, but here he's not. But how do we get him engaged? He's got something in his hand.
D, I, O, N, A, L, sensational, T, H.
So he's added on. We have poor motor control, but we have sensational thinking abilities. So here we are, saying matter. You know, of course, this is developed over time. It's with fluent students. It's with them coming together as a group. But this is not a whole bunch of people going into their corner and spelling out an answer. Okay, so constructing meaning roundtable, and these we go around and we get one or two people that started off and we say, what do you have to say about what your friend said? And they can agree or disagree. So here again, the story core. Lisa, the story was so touching. You know, then Matthew adds on, that teacher helped raise a parent, or raise a child that wasn't his own. So then we go back, what do you guys have to say? You know, Juan, I agree with Lisa. You know, I love when they call each other out by name and they tag on. I thought about that too, Matthew. So strange but so sweet. You know, and the family is not defined by love. Is defined by love, not genetics. So true, Lisa.
So they read a story and then you go around?
We've done it's constructivist learning. So we're doing hunks. You know, we're talking about it. We've done all these different levels of discourse and response. It's not just, you know, this is part of a collective time in the group. And then, you know, we'll ask a question and then they comment back to each other. So now the discussion is student-led, not adult-led. Okay, so then the collaborative responses is when everybody takes a line. We love to do this for writing poetry. You write a line, you write a line, you write a line. This was a Poe-inspired poet. So now this became incorporated into the play that they did, the play that they wrote with the high school students where the poetry was included. And here's the high school kids acting out this poem.
Inside a loud boat. Hide and seek emotions you may never find. Locked up, without a key. Inside here's an honest man. A spirit lost in the portal.
Many screams echo in my quiet head, slowly slinking through thoughts of dread.
And this was their poem. To see it come to life was powerful.
My head churned with these thoughts unread.
You win! Are you satisfied? A fire is laughing! A storm is singing! Help me assign speech to the thoughts instead. For you sing with joy when read. Think these slippery thoughts and words I've said. Can't get it out! It won't come out! Like a cry stuck in my throat. I want to lose all hope. But then it comes. Like a train barreling down a track. My freedom! My freedom!
This is huge. So for us to see their words portrayed, to have an audience who's listening, and as one of my guys said, this is the way I would say it if I could. You know. So our groups are growing. We've got littles, our little 6-year-olds, you know, and with the moms. You know, this little nugget, he's been doing RPM for 2 years now. You know, he wanders around the room, but he's hopping on and getting in the boards. So we get same, but at a lower level, that interaction between the kids with the littles. You know, we use the boards that they need. This one needs, you know, sort of sensory boards, which is very, very, very tactile. We've got a girls group. Here we're in there, we've got the moms participating, coaching them, you know, the kids interacting with each other. It's really cool. What turned out to be a boys group, it invited them kind of mixed, and it just kind of fell out of who was able to come at a particular time. Again, same age, similar abilities, parents on in the room, interacting. And this one, our whole session was about the monkey who stole the camera and took the selfie. It was a really cool conversation to do with the 9-year-olds around a lesson. Okay, so how do you do this? You don't need to come to my group. You can establish your own group. Create a community, we talked about that. Consider your students. You know, put them together of like minds. You have to have goals. You have to have a plan. Gather your talent. Get your subject matter experts in there. You all know smart people. If you're not good at science, find someone who is. And follow your students' interests. That keeps them engaged. We'll have it posted on the thing.
I'll put it back 1 second, go ahead. There you go. Because it will be posted, but, okay, so I'm moving.
And so last
So
is,
closing.
never stop learning. Consult your subject matter experts. So we find, you know, the ones who teach us the most are the kids. So here's our gal Catherine down in Atlanta doing a little teaching of her own.
Spell J. No, Yes.
I think someone's going to put me out of a job.
Yes.
You all know Soma, and you know Soma sticks to a schedule.
Yes.
Soma's ready to move on, but if you want to ask 2 questions, we'll take 2 questions.
I have a question. Do you do anything special to try to get your group to initiate conversation on the board without having to be asked something?
This is about teaching. This is not about kids going wild. So we're really having it. It's wild enough in there. We've got a topic, we've got questions, and then we follow there back and forth. But otherwise you end up with things like, I like your shirt. You're my friend, you know, and this kind of thing without, you know, getting them engaged around a topic. So we really do it for learning. And again, we're building tolerance so that they can do things like participate in school, in education, things like that.
But do you feel they have something to say to you that they can grab that board, or they're just the...
That's a whole nother skill
Only
thing.
2 questions. 1 more person.
What's the timeline for how long it takes to do those sections? I may be different, but I just...
It depends. These learners, it depends on where my learners are. You know, my adult learners, they've been working together for a year and a half. They're all very, very fluent in the boards. For our little guys, I mean, the new groups, we've just started. So they're, you know, just at the beginning stage of coming together as a group.
Like, how often are you meeting?
My young adults group, we meet once a week. And during the summer, we met 4 days a week, you know, because it was summertime. And the younger kids group, we meet once a month, rotating around.
That's it for the questions for now. Elizabeth is going to be here the rest of the day, so you can catch her at lunch or after the program. Don't go away. We're setting up right away for the next session.
Is there a way that we can see it on the internet? Yes. Whatever you put up
The special conference is going to a lot of useful stuff.